Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you may be. I'm Dr. Inderpal, and I'm the founder and CEO of the Food Allergy Institute. Sorry for the slight delay there. We had a little technical difficulties, but we were back on track. It's good to be back with you here in September. We do these types of webinars at least once a month, and our goal here is very simple. We want you to be able to walk away from this webinar understanding what the Tolerance Induction Program is, how it operates, how it applies to you or your child, and of course, ultimately answer any and all questions you may have. I think that's the most beneficial, part of these type of webinars is you will get to hear the questions and concerns of everyone who we're able to answer questions from in the time that's allotted. Today, we try to pick different themes. Today's theme is really talking about safety. It is the absolute number one, top, unwavering priority of our organization. It has been that way since its inception 20 years ago, and I have not budged on this, not a single bit. This is a very, very serious organization taking on a very serious problem, and what that means is safety has to be number one in everything we do. You'll get to understand what that means, the systems that have been built from the technology side all the way to the application side. I think it's really remarkable. It outshines anything else that's out there, not only in the space of food allergy, but I'd even argue in that of modern medicine. So with that said, we're going to kick off here with a quick video, and we'll see you on the other side. So once again, welcome. You're hearing directly from me. I'm the founder and CEO of the Food Allergy Institute. This organization has been derived from my initial research 20 years ago, and we continue to drive and really be the leaders in the food allergy space. Everything from diagnosis to therapy to remission. We continue to strive every day with a very large organization and a dedicated team that's fully focused on our mission. Our mission is simple. We want every child, every young adult who has and suffers from food anaphylaxis to not have to live with that disease anymore. That means we want these young people to be able to achieve remission. That means they consume foods like a non-allergic person. They live their life like a non-allergic person, and that is tracked through the entire scientific data science and models that allow them to achieve that success. We are now well into the mid 20,000 number of patients in this program. It makes us the global leader in the space, really by far, and we continue to strive with all of the success. My experience in the world of transplant immunology as an ICU transplant immunologist has led to the way this organization is built. Certainly from a safety standpoint, I think you get a very clear sense of why and how somebody who has my type of experience and certifications is able to kind of pursue this approach. This is not the typical experience of most physicians. It's certainly not the typical experience of most allergy immunology specialists. They don't spend time on a regular basis in the ICU setting, and I think that'll be abundantly clear as we kind of proceed from there. I'd like to also introduce my colleague here today who's going to be joining us. This is Mia Loftus. She joined us since 2019. It seems to have been a bit longer than that, but Mia is going to be joining us talking about her experience as one of our leads on the safety side of this organization. She's been here long enough to see all the success, all the stories, and also all the complex cases that come in, which I think just makes a huge difference in in how we operate on a regular basis. So Mia, I don't know if you want to jump in here real quick and say a few words.
Great. I'll just say hello to everyone. We're really excited to be here with everyone today. This is a very unique place, and you'll be able to tell just from speaking with Dr. Randhawa and I today how mission-focused we are, and also how different this experience is. A little bit about myself. I'm originally from the Philadelphia area, and got my nursing degree and nurse practitioner degree at the University of Pennsylvania. And had some experience in my nursing career at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. And as Dr. Randhawa said, I joined the Food Allergy Institute here in 2019, and it's been amazing. I have really fallen in love with the work that we do here, and it's different than any other type of medicine because in a relatively short period of time, you see something that people haven't been able to achieve in a full lifetime. So really getting to know the patients, their families, and seeing how their lives change from one year to the next in treatment here, and giving kids an opportunity to really experience life in a way that a lot of times, and medicine has said would never be possible for them, is really exciting. So there's that great relationship side and very exciting medicine and technology that's happening here that we'll talk to you guys about today to show you how that safety is built into your journey through that technology.
Thanks, Mia. So, for those of you who have not been able to kind of dive into our website or talk to our enrollment team, I wanted to spend a minute or two here talking about overview of what TIP really is. This is an entirely unique model and program. This is the Tolerance Induction Program. And as the term defines itself, our goal is to induce tolerance. And that means taking foods that were once anaphylactic and really put them into not only a state of tolerance, but ultimately a state of remission. And that is the goal for every single patient. We really try to work hard to do this as quickly as possible. But you can understand that when you're trying to move an immune system from a state of anaphylaxis to a state of tolerance, it has to be done with a lot of logic and a lot of methods. So TIP works in a very organized, logic-based process. This is all the work that was done at the start of this organization 20 years ago. We had to first understand exactly how all of these proteins are organized, meaning we're talking about plant proteins. Think of tree nuts, peanuts, legumes, and so forth, seeds. And then we also had to understand how animal proteins are organized. Think of things like milk, eggs, fish, shellfish, and so forth. And by building up large databases of information across these proteins, we're talking about sequencing proteins. We're looking at everything from phylogenetics to other forms of evolutionary protein biology. That allowed us to start to understand how the organization can interact with the immune system. And ultimately, this required a lot of applied math, machine learning, and ultimately this turns into a highly patient-specific program. So what does that kind of mean from a very high level? It means that you come in and unlike any other form of allergy diagnosis, you're going to get a highly accurate diagnosis with one single blood draw and a cumulative number of tests, about 400 tests per person. We're going to be able to utilize all of our previous data, trillions and trillions of data markers to really create the right accurate level of diagnosis for your child or you yourself. We then take that same information and we actually then organize a process of treatment. This treatment process includes a pre-treatment component, a conditioning component, a tolerance induction component, and a remission component. And these are unique to every single patient. And again, the beauty of AI is that it's able to forecast this with a high level of success and accuracy. And of course, all of the human operators, all of the staff and teams and clinical personnel are all trained on how to utilize this system so it's absolutely as safe as possible and as effective as possible so patients can actually achieve the success of remission. It also means that the majority of this work can actually be done at home. The vast majority of your dosing and updosing is actually done at home. That is not the case for pretty much any other form of treatment that's ever existed. So how can you take this type of treatment and actually do dose adjustments at home? Well, again, that's the accuracy of major data modeling and data science, because we've in many ways have seen probably almost any level of anaphylaxis and any level of complexity. This is something that we are just used to, and we've done a great job utilizing our data models to predict that level of safety. So at-home dosing is standardized and it makes things a whole lot easier. We are clearly not a one-size-fits-all approach. That's been tried, and that's still classical modern medicine, right? Everybody gets the same pill, the same shot, the same injection. and then you hope it's going to somehow create an effect. Here it is absolutely patient specific. If we have two siblings, they're for sure going to be on isolated and unique forms of diagnosis and unique forms of treatment. With this high level of accuracy, you're not going to see a lot of trial and error. About 85% of our patients will go start to finish. That's 85%, and they will have zero symptoms the entire time. The number of adjustments that are made as the process goes forward is often very few, although the adjustments can be made accordingly based on repeat data that occurs in the program. Again, that's a unique model to only us. And we really can treat what nobody else can treat, right? So if there's any level of complexity, whether it's asthma, eczema, other types of autoimmune diseases, eosinophilic esophagitis, these are the complex patients we're used to treating. We'll help co-manage those conditions and get those same patients to the finish line, to remission, just like everyone else. And we are, again, very proud of our minimum reaction rate. Again, we'd love to have a 0% reaction rate. That's something we will continue to strive to achieve, but ultimately getting to that goal of safety first, and then of course the goal of remission, or as we call food freedom, is something that we absolutely will target, because ultimately that is the life of non-avoidance. We want you or your child to go out in the world, be able to consume foods like a non-allergic person, which makes things just so much better. How do we do this? How do we get the guesswork out of food anaphylaxis and diagnosis and treatment? Again, it goes back to our model. So because we are a data science company, we're a technology company, we are able to utilize mass scale data and mass amounts of machine learning and AI to actually get things done accurately. This is work we have published. We've done across major peer review in some of the top journals in medicine and in computer science. So we're really proud of both of those sides. How do we do this? Again, we're able to run a lot of data on every single patient. If you go to any other physician or program, what they often do is they just ask you, like, well, what do you think you're allergic to? And they'll ask you what you want to get tested to. We don't do that here. We run the same large-scale battery of data, which studies your allergic profile. We study your tolerance profile. We also study how your immune system works at a baseline landscape. That data is then input into our AI system that compares that specific information to trillions and trillions of data points from tens of thousands of other patients. That allows us to give an accurate diagnosis, and ultimately that achieves an accurate level of treatment, which is huge. We also then are able to take that analysis and create a forecast. So we will actually tell you how many anticipated number of visits you will need to be in the program, when you will clear cross-contamination against different foods, and ultimately when you reach remission, where you then obviously can consume everything without limitation, without restriction, and that again just makes life a whole lot easier. And then I'd say one real key point, because our theme here today is safety, is we are able to make real-time adjustments with this model. And again, that's not something you hear about in medicine. If there's ever a problem, you simply input it into our Tip Connect system, or you call our on-call providers who are on 24/7 for serious symptoms, and we can make adjustments often in a matter of minutes or hours to get you right back on track. And that also utilizes that same data modeling and database system. And again, that type of really keen approach to things is something that we just don't see in a lot of other places in healthcare. In addition, we've taken a lot of effort and a lot of energy to make sure that when we talk about how to dose biosimilar proteins and primary allergens, that we have to do this right. When I first started this organization years ago, this is where I spent quite a bit of time, because I knew that the amount of protein, these critical proteins that are part of our biosimilar immunotherapy, have to be down to micrograms. That's correct. That's micrograms of protein. And what I found was that even in modern pharmaceuticals, let's talk about the pharmaceutical industry, they often don't measure things down to micrograms with any degree of consistency. And I found that fascinating. And I also knew that if we're going to deploy TIP correctly, we had to solve for that problem. And so we have done so. Our food laboratory, which is, again, the world's only of its kind, is able to actually take very complex proteins, put them into very specific products, and we measure that from the point going in to the point going out to make sure that we have high levels of accuracy, to make sure that when patients are getting their key kind of critical treatment foods, that there's never a question of that dose response mechanism. It's going to be right every single time. And with that, that gives us predictability in how the immune system will respond. If you look at other forms of the OIT world or other forms of therapy, often they're using pretty non-standardized approaches, and that's just the way it is. They're sourcing materials that are not standardized. So if you're trying to pull peanut protein, or let's call it peanut that's ground up, or peanut flour, and you're mixing it in liquids, that's the dilutional type approach. But the actual amount of protein that is being measured is actually not standardized. And I think that speaks to kind of the levels of accuracy that goes towards the world of OIT. So again, what we've done here and we continue to do, which is continued growth and expansion of our food laboratory, is to make sure we do this right and safe every time. So these gummies and tart products that we have, to our patients, they kind of taste like candy, and they're good, and we make them as health conscious as possible. But the main point is it has real exact measurement to it, which makes things a lot safer and a lot more effective for our patients. We do third-party testing. Well, to be more fair, we do in-house and third-party testing on products that are coming in. So you're talking about cultivar measurements as protein comes into the food lab, and of course, post-production, what that looks like as well, to make sure that the right amount of protein and the right types of proteins are actually present in these individual products. We worked very hard to get to this stage, and as the next months go by, we'll be adding additional gummies and tart products into our system, including things like animal proteins specific to egg first. So with that said, I'm going to hand off to Mia.
All right, so just to speak a little bit to the actual experience of a food challenge, this term is used in traditional allergist office as well. So we want to take some time to understand what the difference between these food challenges you may see in allergist office and what a food challenge here at the Food Allergy Institute looks like. So you guys may have some experience with these food challenges. A lot of times they are using this as a form of diagnosis in the allergy world. So it, again, relies a lot on some trial and error. There might be direct allergen exposure without knowing what a patient's threshold for a reaction is. There might be increasing amounts of this allergen given over time. And you're usually expecting a fairly long day of observation there because there's risk of this delayed reaction. We have a lot of patients that come in and tell us about these experiences as well, where they're leaving, going to the parking lot a couple hours later and having symptoms. So a lot of times this is what you have in mind when thinking about a food challenge. For our food challenges, like Dr. Randhawa mentioned, there's a lot of the dosing that happens at home. So when you come in initially, there might be some foods that you are able to challenge right off the bat based on our testing that we've confirmed that these will be safe challenges for you. And then moving forward, often you'll have a small introduction that's done in clinic. So observed the first time that you're having the food. And then you'll go home, and again, based on our data, we know that it is safe for you to proceed with certain updoses at home. So there's going to be a number of weeks where you're spending time at home increasing your dosage. So you do not need to be in office for each dosage increase. That is able to happen safely at home. And then when you're coming back, based on the fact that all those updoses have gone well, we are confident that your child is going to pass that challenge. So that's the difference, is that when we are coming back in for a challenge, our expectation is that your child is going to pass this challenge. So there's really not trial and error in this, and it is guided by that initial diagnostic and any repeat diagnostic that we do along the way. Another thing is our food challenges usually happen over the course of about an hour. And a reason we can do this is we do an immune stress test during our food challenges. So after the food has been consumed, your child will go and do 5 minutes of vigorous exercise. On the next slide, we'll show what that vigorous exercise looks like. It's honestly kids having fun. So we're making sure their heart rate's getting up, but they're getting to do some fun things along the way. And we are monitoring during this whole process. So from the minute you check in, they will be hooked up to get vital signs and then have heart rate monitoring throughout their challenge, and then go and do their stress test and then come back, and we will continue to monitor those vital signs and their heart rate following the exercise as well, really ensuring that they are tolerating this food challenge well. So as we talked about here, I think there were some videos if you guys wanted to share those. So here's some of our exercise, our vigorous exercise happening here. Get music going, it's a lot of fun. But basically, to walk you through the day again, we will have check-in initially with your provider. So you are seen within a pod, you get to see similar providers, one of the same couple of providers every visit. So that helps bridge that gap. You're not re-explaining who you are each time that you come in. So it builds a relationship there. And then we are confirming that your child is ready for this challenge. There's a lot of communication that can happen outside of clinic, but again, you're getting a physical assessment, going through any issues that might have come up along the way, making sure your child is healthy today and really ready for this challenge that they're about to have. So there is a level of checkoff that happens before we even do the challenge, and we are not going to put your child at risk. If anything doesn't line up, we will make those adjustments. Then those food challenges happen where patients are eating the food over the course of about 5 minutes and really quickly go into that immune stress testing right after. So this is how we could really tell that your child is going to be safe with this consumption at home under any amount of stress, and that we are safe to not have a full day of monitoring, that we've really pushed their system. And then again, we'll recheck vitals and do some more monitoring before going home. And in 2024, our clinical care team carried out 56,228 food challenges and introductions with a total reaction rate of less than 1%. So these are some interesting numbers. If you go to your allergist office and ask how many food challenges they have done in a year, I bet it'll be a lot less than this. So really just to point out that we are doing this all day, every day. So our team is trained for these challenges, and we are also trained to handle any level of reaction. We do a lot of mock reactions, so everyone on our team is prepared to deal with this, recognize symptoms early, and make sure they can safely handle all of those. Dr. Randhawa, I don't know if you want to speak to that any further.
Yeah, thanks, Mia. I mean, I would just say that, you know, to your point, this is all we do. This is our number one priority and focus. And I would add, you know, if you look at our hard numbers, about 1 out of 900 challenges result in some sort of symptoms that we have to kind of manage. So, you know, it's a very good set of numbers to look at from a reaction standpoint. But as we always say, we're trying to get better. And interestingly, if you kind of go back 10 years, our numbers are getting better, which means that the accuracy behind the applied math and AI systems is actually forecasting and predicting better models, and the better models are resulting in even lower risk in that sense.
All right. And then another unique part of our organization is the comprehensive support that we have. So this treatment doesn't happen in a silo. We are constantly collaborating with your other specialists. So if your child has an asthma diagnosis or any GI diagnosis, an immunology diagnosis, we need to make sure that that is well controlled. Before and during the TIP process, we always say normal anatomy and normal immune system is what we need for TIP to work best. So we are happy to collaborate and make sure that we can provide any input with your specialists and how to make sure we're in the best place for TIP treatment. And then we definitely are going to be using data to track symptoms along the way and check up on your child's immune progress along the way. So like Dr. Randhawa mentioned earlier, if there's ever any change that we need to make, we will always go back to the data. So we will get repeat testing and come up with a new path forward for you. So if issues arise, it is not by any means the end of a journey. We always take time to regroup and reassess where the immune system is at that time. And again, this is personalized care. So those adjustments are made to ensure safety along the way. The way we can do this is through our command center. So you guys have 24-hour support through our command center, which is staffed by nurse practitioners. Our medical doctors are there to speak about each day any cases that come up that need to be reviewed. So again, we are making adjustment, talking about any issues that come up in real time. So you will have an answer very quickly. So this support is necessary because 90% of TIP treatment takes place at home. So you know that you have that support as you're doing dosing at home. And then all families are trained on scenario plans. So you will have a personalized scenario plan with guidance on exact dosage of medications for various different situations. So depending on the level of symptoms, we have already laid out for you what medications you would be given. So if in the event that you had any reaction, if you were calling into our on-call team, of course, that's always nerve-wracking, but you have been prepared and trained on how to deal with this. And then we are there to support and guide you through all of those next steps. And then the follow-up happens from there, where we guide you into what this means for your program and how we will adjust from there. I don't know if you have anything to add to that, Dr. Randhawa.
Look, I'm very proud of our command center. I mean, it is the pulse of our organization. I mean, again, imagine if you go through any other form of treatment. If you have a problem, what are you asked to do? You were asked to go to the ER, maybe deploy an epi, and they'll call you back the next business day, or maybe the following Monday. And that's not what we do. 24/7, 365 since the inception of this program. We've been 100% dedicated to make sure that we know exactly what's going on with every patient. We're now taking this to the next level with our fully integrated patient app that's in beta version right now, go live here in October, just next month. This is patient specific, meaning you'll know exactly what you're supposed to do, when to do it, click to close, compliance monitoring, and so forth. But again, direct connectivity to our command center. And again, I feel like this is the way healthcare should be. This is the way it should be for any condition. And yet, we use our emergency medical service system as almost the go-to, for any time things go wrong. But that can't be the case when you're actually trying to take care of patients, especially in this program. So I would just, kind of add to Mia's points here and say that whether it's an acute set of symptoms that are going on, or it's a chronic case that's complex, we have not only the ability to manage those cases, but we have the case management support in-house to work with other specialists, other providers, and really take every case and get them to the finish line. That is our absolute number one goal.
And as Dr. Randhawa noted earlier, we have many patients that go through TIP treatment with no reactions or notable side effects. But in the event that those do occur, we are prepared to deal with those, manage those, and make adjustments to continue safely in TIP.
And maybe I could just add to that. So 85% of our patients go start to finish with no symptoms. So that's pretty much what's seen on this slide. 15% who do are going to have usually one symptom. So that's usually isolated one-time symptom. That is usually what we call a grade 1 symptom, meaning like it's an itchy throat or a mild abdominal pain. A very small percentage is in the second group, which is, they might have a grade 2 set of symptoms. So that could be wheezing and hives, things of that nature. Then the smallest group is the 1% who actually can have a few of those symptoms. But again, because we're tracking everything so closely, we will do everything possible that if there is a significant symptom, we're going to avoid it from happening again, right? So that's, we are studying the threshold of every case individually, and those adjustments based on large scale data are able to be formed, and it makes a big difference in trying to move the patient forward. Again, tripling down on the concept of safety.
You can't get anything better than this when you've experienced the food allergies. It's like Christmas every day. Hi, my name is Cooper Campbell. This is my mom, Lisa. I'm 18 years old and I've been in the program for about 5 years. Starting from when a baby, I had a few reactions to things, just rashes and things. But my first major reaction, I was 5 and I was eating dried fruit out of a trail mix bag.
First visit to the doctors was less than stellar. And basically at the time they said, here's an EpiPen, carry this and avoid eating all these foods. Good luck. And that was it.
It definitely put a huge impact on our life. It changed everything from that instance on.
I don't remember exactly how we heard about the Tolerance Induction Program, but as soon as I heard about it, I immediately asked our primary care physician, and she was unaware of it. And I just kept digging and digging and calling, and we were lucky to be one of the early patients in the program.
Being able to go out and again, to be able to be myself and not have to worry. I was able to go out to restaurants and hang out with my friends, do sleepovers. Another huge win is that I get to go off to college and not have to have her worry that something's gonna happen to me. I'm now gonna be okay.
Knowing the end goal was food freedom and her never having to worry again was all worth it.
So that's just, one of our many remission patients. The stories are really numerous, and, we encourage you to kind of, go online, talk to our enrollment team, look at our stories. We also have other volunteer groups and webinars where you can actually talk to these families directly. We are achieving typically between 2 to 3 remission patients every day that we're open for food challenges. And that's just remarkable, right? If you think about it, that many patients are achieving remission every single day. So we're going to answer a few previously submitted questions up front, and then of course we will go to the live Q&A. I'll take the first one, which is often asked, why is TIP not offered anywhere else? The simplest answer is we are a large organization. We have hundreds of employees inside this organization. Not only do we have the command center, which we just talked about in detail, but we have everything from diagnostic laboratory that operates, 24/7 at the highest level of standards possible. We have our own food laboratory with food scientists and food manufacturing that's occurring. We have our own applied mathematicians, software experts, AI experts in-house doing the work every single day, not to mention the hundreds of clinical staff and the individuals who are actually spread across 3 sites now: San Diego, our primary hub here south of Los Angeles, and of course, our San Francisco site, which went live just over a month ago. And so it's not easy to just simply offer this somewhere else because there's a lot of complexity in the process, but it is something that we, as demonstrated in San Francisco, are able to start to expand and do it safely. I'll go back to that concept of safety. If we were to just, kind of take the software and system and say, all right, let's give it to any other doctor and have them use it, I would argue that the risk to patients becomes quite high. It takes our physicians at least 3 to 4 months to be trained, and then typically 1 year plus of experience with our system to become very comfortable with it. And I think it's something that is evidence to the way this form of clinical science is actually unraveling as it is. So we know that when done properly, we can expand, get out there to the masses, but this is something that takes critical steps. No one else has done this work. This has been bootstrapped. We've taken 0 external investment dollars since day one. And so this has been my model. We will not sacrifice safety just for the sake of expansion. But as we continue to get to our next steps here, that will be an option. So hopefully that answers that question. Second question, maybe I'll hand off to Mia.
Yes, so does TIP require the use of medications? There are no medication requirements, although we do recommend the use of a daily antihistamine. So this is a daily long-acting antihistamine that we recommend during the course of the program. Just to speak to that a little bit, where that recommendation comes from, if you think of a bucket as a histamine bucket, you probably notice your kids right now, there are days where you see that bucket overflow. You see some of the sneezing going on, some of the the runny nose as seasons changing, maybe as they have illnesses. So without the TIP program as part of their life, there is this risk for seeing that bucket overflow. So then when we're adding TIP on top of that, we really want to have their system as stable as possible. So that daily antihistamine is really just like a little drain in the bucket. So that way we're not having external factors such as environmental, illness, menstrual cycles, really causing that bucket to overflow. So it really just helps to stabilize the system of an allergic patient as we go through TIP treatment. So it is recommended, but there are not really any heavy medications. I know some OIT programs really recommend the use of a Xolair or other medications to assist along the way, but here we're really just using food to treat food.
Thanks, Mia. Number 3 is, how do biosimilar foods essentially, or how do similar food proteins work to retrain the immune system? Mia, you want to take that, and I can add on to it.
Sure. So yes, as we mentioned, it's really using food to treat food. So Dr. Randhawa will get into the complex answer. I'll use the answer I give when I go out to dinner with people and they ask what I do. So if we're looking at a protein like peanut, for example, there are a lot of foods that have similar proteins to peanut. So when you come in and your child is allergic to peanut, we are not going to start with giving them peanut right away. That's a good way to kind of blast their system and can send things much higher than they already are. So what we do is start with foods that are similar to peanut. So we might start with a chickpea or an almond or other foods in this category. And their daily exposure to this in the beginning is really going to get their body to start to recognize these proteins that are shared with peanut. And then over time, their body starts to say, hey, this feels okay to me. So by the time we actually are getting to peanut, their body has been conditioned to already recognize some of these proteins as okay. And you'll even see in blood work that we complete before introducing this allergen that we're starting to see those numbers come down and evidence that the body is recognizing this peanut in their system. So yes, if you were out to dinner with me, that's how I explain it. My husband likes to explain it to people that way too. So we are really excited about this type of work, and probably a way you've never thought about food allergies before.
Yeah, I would just add to that. This has obviously been the constellation of my work for 20 years. It's in some ways straightforward, and in some ways it's not. The straightforward aspect is every primary plant protein and animal protein shares biosimilar components with a multitude of other proteins. That's part of the process of evolution. Peanut has 17 primary epitopes. We measure against all 17 epitopes. We find the right biosimilar protein for your child or yourself. We know how to dose that right. We know how to dose it correctly. Once you achieve the right amount of dose, what will end up happening is your immune system will start to retrain itself. And as it retrains itself, it stops producing the allergic response to peanut as a primary. What that means is the vast majority of our patients will see around a 50 to 70% reduction in their peanut specific values, IgE specific values of allergy, that will drop that much before we ever give them peanut. And that's because of this set of models that have been built through my work. I saw an interesting question in the chat that was asking, well, how does that mechanism, this biosimilar mechanism, compare to not doing it that way? And that's a great question, because the not doing it that way, that's called OIT. That's fundamental. So OIT is simply saying we're going to not care about any biosimilar proteins. We're just going to give you straight what you're anaphylactic to. And the results of OIT speak for themselves, right? They have high risk of reactions, very high risk of dropout after 1 year of completion. And they tend to have a ability to achieve a minimum amount of intake. So you're still living a life of avoidance. This program uses the biosimilar models to not only achieve initial remission, but actually to get to points of deep remission, where when patients are a few years out in this program, they're only maintaining, as far as their proteins are concerned, every 2 weeks, 3 weeks, or 4 weeks, and the rest of the time they consume food like a totally non-allergic person, and that is standalone to our program only. Question number 4 is, what is the most severe case of TIP that has been successfully treated? There's a lot of very severe cases of TIP. As I always tell people, 65% of our patients any given month would be categorized as severe. They have multiple complex forms of anaphylaxis. Some of them have other comorbidities. Some have mast cell disorders. Some have, we have patients who have gone organ transplantation have come in. So you can imagine the complexity that we're used to dealing with. If I had to narrow it down to just one case, I would go back to a case I had of a patient who came in at the age of 9, and he was only able to consume 4 foods. That's what he was able to consume. Imagine there were so many foods that he was anaphylactic to that list was incredibly long. His dietary intake was extremely abnormal because he could not consume normal food. In fact, he had serious jaw and dental problems because he did not know how to chew normal food. He has ended up getting diagnosed through my work with a genetic mutation for a type of eosinophilic disorder on top of that. But now it's been almost 18 years later, he consumes all foods normally, like a non-allergic person. And not only that, we treated the rest of his disease state successfully. So we are not uncomfortable when it comes to treating complex cases. That is what we do every day. Now, with that being said, we also treat, normal cases, whatever you want to call that, kind of middle of the road. That's totally up our alley as well. Number 5 is, how do patients maintain remission? Why don't you take a go at that one?
Sure. So patients maintain remission. It's really important we use the term remission here and not a cure. You have done a lot of work dosing through foods on your TIP journey. And as we move into remission, what we define remission as is sustained unresponsiveness, or the ability to consume a food and go a period of time. For our purposes, we use 7 days. 7 days without having exposure to it, and consume it again without any allergic response. So when you enter into remission, that is the dosing regimen that you will have initially is weekly doses. So weekly exposures throughout the week are required. And then on top of that, you're eating like a non-allergic person. So you may, for example, have your large peanut exposure once a week, and then you're having your drumstick when you're having ice cream with friends. You're having a peanut butter cup. You're having pad thai. So you're able to eat these other exposures to peanut on top of that once weekly maintenance amount.
All right, thank you very much. We're going to move on to our live Q&A. So as we usually do, what we ask you is to raise your hand. And, once we see your hand up, we will ask you to unmute. It'd be nice if you can to put yourself, on camera. Let us know where you're from. Let us know, how you heard about us, and then go ahead and proceed with your question. So we will start off here, I guess, 1 second here with Julianne. You might be able to unmute yourself. Yep, go ahead. Julianne, can you unmute?
Hello there. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Sorry, I'm actually not Julianne. My name is Josie Howard Rubin. I am a nurse. I have an adult child with food allergies. I find what you've said very interesting. And I come from an oncology background, and I've done clinical trials over the years. And so, you did speak to comparing between this treatment and OIT, but how about in any sort of randomized clinical trial approach where you can demonstrate the non-inferiority, if you will, of whatever, the experimental treatment is? And I'm just wondering why that has not happened with this vast number of patients that you have been able to treat.
Yeah, that's a great question. It's actually a pretty straightforward answer. Because every patient is their own control, and that's fundamentally what it is. And you can look at all of our publications. Every single patient is their own control. You cannot randomize to that point. So there's essentially no way to take a patient and say, I'm going to compare this patient to this patient, and I'm going to randomize one of them and, you know, put them on placebo, and I'll take the other and I'll go and put them in TIP. It's impossible, because every patient is their own diagnostic profile and their own therapeutic model. So therefore that can't happen. And unfortunately, the second side of that is from an ethics standpoint. Remember, every one of our patients is under a multitude of IRB consents, and that's something we've done since day one for this specific reason. We have attempted in the past to run a general TIP versus placebo group, and the IRB actually denied it because the efficacy of TIP is so high. And that's a common thing you see in pediatrics when you have that type of outcome. So thanks for that question. Next is Parth. How are you?
Yeah, can you hear me?
A little choppy, but go ahead. Let's see if we can hear your question.
Okay, yeah, I'm from Texas, and my daughter has a severe dairy and egg allergy. Her IgE levels are above 104, and I wanted to know what kind of efficacy you've had with TIP for that of allergy with dairy. And follow-up question to that is, you know, what is the risk of anaphylaxis if you were to explore the TIP with that levels of high allergy for milk?
Yeah, I'll just restate the question for the group in case it wasn't, everyone can hear that. He's describing his daughter's case where she has dairy allergy. It sounds like that's primary or only dairy allergy, with numbers that are so high you can't quantify them. So, you know, what that means is numbers above 100. And, you know, one of the benefits of running our own diagnostics data, and keep in mind, we run a laboratory now for almost a decade that is CLIA COLA-CAP certified at the highest level possible. So this is called a level 3 high complexity lab. What that means is we're able to run data across the spectrum beyond 100. So we know what those values look like beyond 100. The reason why when you get labs done at your local offices and they cap it at 100 is because that is federal regulation. Federal regulatory agencies make you kind of have a range limit. So what that means for a case like your daughter's is that, yes, we take many patients who have values over 100 to dairy. You can look at our dairy, publication from just a year and a half, 2 years ago now that was published in the Journal of Allergy and Clinical Immunology, and you can see the numbers of patients that we have whose values are kind of maxed out at that 100 type range. That if you're asking for a specific number in total years, right now about 1/3 of our patients come in with very high dairy anaphylaxis. Okay, if you want a specific number on that, we can pull that for you offline, but it's certainly going to be in the thousands. Of those patients, how many of them achieve remission? The answer is very close to 100%. Do they have more reactions than other patients? The answer is no, they do not. So, every patient will go through the same standardized model as far as testing, AI-based forecasting, and then they'll go through the process of treatment. Certainly those numbers are going to sound concerning to anybody because when you have values of 100, that's a concern. But for us, it's essentially the same work, and we will study the response mechanisms to make sure that her process through the treatment program is as safe and as standardized as possible. Thank you for that question. Next up is Sura. Password unmute. Go ahead and unmute, please. No, still not. Oh,
there you go. It worked. Well, thank you for the opportunity. We actually joined the launch meeting last month, so we just started. I'm still trying to understand the result. So the bottom line, it just result confirmed what we already knew, which is great. And then it eliminated one allergen that we thought we're severely allergic to, which was coconut, but he didn't have any reaction. So that's our safe food, and we're starting to eating it. The part that I was still puzzling, and I'm going to hear from you, is the peanut became in a category of anaphylactic section, but he's been eating peanut in large quantity every day. So well, I'm grateful that he can eat it, but based on the result, that discrepancy gives me a little like uncomfortable feelings about moving forward. So, and then his test results, like IgE, is like less than 0.32. So I want to understand how all those results can translate into him categorized peanut as a anaphylactic section.
Yeah, that's a great question. So if you look at accuracy of testing, like as a whole, right? So whether you look at blood-based tests or skin prick testing, accuracy towards any allergen when it comes to those specific types of tests is going to hover in the kind of 40 to 60% range, right? So it's not very accurate at baseline. What we have to do is look at the AI modeling, right? So the AI modeling has to look at not only just skin and blood tests, but we actually take those to a much deeper level. That's kind of going up to those 400 test parameters. The system has to look at not only what it predicts as an answer, but it also has to look at the other biosimilar proteins that are found in other protein families. So that can look at things like tree nuts, it can look at seeds and things of that nature, right? And again, it has to look at this mass amount of data and it has to make a prediction. If you look at our several publications now that have looked at the accuracy of our AI system as far as what it can predict, it is in this 94-95% range. That's what our publications were, and that's even what was submitted to the FDA. And so, you know, it's not 100%, just to be clear, right? 5% is going to be off now. So one option is maybe it's off with the 5% with your son's case. But also argue a different point, and that is it's important to remember that just because a child is consuming a food, does it mean that they're not anaphylactic at risk? It's a fundamental question, right? And I'd encourage you to actually just go online. You can Google and ChatGPT this stuff and look up the term recurrent peanut allergy, right? Recurrent peanut allergy. And you will find a multitude of publications, not from us, but from other institutions, where they have found individuals who are consuming peanuts or other foods. And in the end, they would actually have an anaphylactic reaction despite consumption. And that's a very important thing that I think everyone on this call should hear, because what it reflects is the statistics that we know. So if you look at the largest group of people who have anaphylaxis to food, right? The largest group in the US, it is adults. So people over the age of 21. If you look at that group, 65% of them will develop anaphylaxis after the age of 21, and they've had previously consumed those foods. I'll say it one more time. So 2/3 of the adults who are over 21 who developed food anaphylaxis were previously consuming food, and they developed an anaphylactic reaction. So what does that tell us? It tells us that food consumption alone, just whatever we consider food consumption, does not necessarily protect you from anaphylaxis. So some of the greatest work that we've done in this organization is to actually understand and know how much food protein do you need to consume at what frequency in order to guarantee that you will not fall back into risk of anaphylaxis. Hopefully that makes some sense, but it's a very important factor. Now, for the results that you're talking about, I encourage you to talk to our team. You can ping them directly, and they will work through that data. That data simply needs to be remodeled, and we need to say, okay, for your son, what is the technical amount of protein that needs to be consumed at what level of frequency to guarantee that that number, which is currently slotted at risk, actually moves, over to the right. That's really the model that you want to look at. But I encourage you to look up everything I just stated online, and you will find that it reverberates quite well. And to me, it's very disturbing. This is why I think the idea of just early food introduction of allergens blindly carries risk. I think the idea of just kind of passing a food challenge and then consuming a food and not having any guidance of how much should I be consuming, what amount of frequency should it be, are there limits on it? That lack of knowledge that's out there is a reflection of the gap that currently exists in the food allergy space.
Okay. Yeah. Well, that his peanut is not in his treatment plan. Does it mean that if he go through all the treatment for other peanut allergy, your institute feel comfortable that you guys don't need to treat the peanut allergy?
100%.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank
Great
you.
question, though. Yeah, you're welcome. All right, next is Shweta. We'll ask you to unmute here in a second.
Hello. Hi, thanks for this wonderful session. I have two questions here. One of them is like you mentioned that there will be need of antihistamine during the duration of the treatment, let's say 2 years, 3 years, or 4 years. I want to understand the potential long-term or short-term side effects of, let's say, we end up taking Zyrtec, which we usually take due to some, once in a while pollen allergy or an accidental ingestion of an allergen. That's what we do. But having to take that for 3 years or 4 years scares me a little bit for my children. I need you to shed some light on it if you see any side effects of that.
Sure. No, it's a very good question. So the class of drugs that are called antihistamines have been around for 100 years. They're like one of the oldest drugs, known to mankind. So from antihistamines, we have probably the most amount of data, from a pharmaceutical standpoint. So, when you look at antihistamines, you look at the fact that it's been over the counter for, literally 60 plus years. It's been utilized across many different medical conditions, and it's been well studied. When you look at what we recommend, we don't recommend just any antihistamine. We actually recommend specific isomers of antihistamines that don't cross the blood-brain barrier, number one. So kind of like any sort of neurological concerns or sleep side effects, that kind of stuff. Those are, I'm not going to say they never get reported. I'd say it's extremely rare. We have a large number of patients in our system. So I'd say maybe once every few years, we have somebody who has a, legitimate concern from utilizing some of these medications. And we will then find an alternative, right? We'll look for something else. It's also important to remember that the antihistamine is utilized for a very specific reason. And we are trying to keep, we're using a sub-therapeutic or a very low dose of antihistamine, number one. Number two, we're trying to modify what is normal physiologic histamine. So what does that mean? When you are, having a great day and you're very happy, your histamine levels go up. When you are crying and upset, your histamine levels go up. When you are having a cold and an illness, your histamine levels go up. This is all very well known and published information. What it does when you're treating patients is that it can create background noise for families that we try to keep modified to a very simple degree. Obviously, once a patient hits remission, we stop the antihistamine. We also stop the antihistamines before food challenges and things of that nature as well. So it's not like they're on it, all the time per se.
Okay.
But we have not seen a significant problem with this. And like I tell everybody, we are under a lot of regulation as an organization. So we have to report our side effects, our what we call adverse events, up and through our institutional review board system that eventually reports to the FDA. So if we actually had a problem here, that would already be dictated accordingly.
Okay. Okay, cool. Thank you so much. My second question was my children, they started out being allergic to milk and egg. These are two different kids. So, but we over the period of time, we have seen them outgrow milk allergies. I would like to believe that it was not a lot to begin with, the allergic reaction, but we always saw hives. Just that actually hives in both my kids. So, and also that I see they've outgrown sesame. Then my daughter's outgrown hazelnut, and she's able to consume. So, given that, will there be some advantage in terms of how the treatment is going to be like? Is it that does it look promising that they have naturally outgrown some things, and this additional treatment will give us a very brighter outcome or much positive result, or maybe like a reduced treatment, not 3 years or 4 years, maybe it takes shorter time to finish this.
Yeah. The honest answer is it probably doesn't make a difference. I know you don't want to hear that, but the truth is, I don't like to use the word outgrow. I like to use the word natural tolerance, right? So there's a natural tolerance that's built in for certain foods. We do know that there's natural tolerance to egg. There is some natural tolerance to milk. The area ends up being complex because typically, if you look at food anaphylaxis patients, they will, and I'm just giving broad statements here, most patients who are even in the most severe categories will preferentially be more anaphylactic to either plant proteins or animal proteins. They are rarely equivocal in their anaphylaxis to both. So when you start to see kind of animal proteins move to natural tolerance, that's good, but it also means that some of their plant protein, tolerance may be not there. But that's why I recommend come in, get your testing done. We'll put it down as far as the risk factors that are in play, and then ultimately, we'll have a discussion about it, and then we'll kind of determine how long the program will be.
Okay. Sounds good. Thank you so much.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Next is Mega. We're going to unmute you here in a second. Hello.
Hi. So I'm from SoCal, Orange County. So I'm quite nearby Long Beach. But I just wanted to know. So my daughter has eczema since she was a baby. So she has allergy all over the place. Environmental allergy, food allergies, it ranges from mild to medium to high severity. So she has been tested with peanut allergy, anaphylactic. Haven't seen any anaphylaxis happening, but we try to be careful. It's not something you want to take risk with. So my question is, with this treatment, are we able to address those mild to medium allergy, food allergies also along with the high one, or just focus on high one?
That's a great question. Yes, we will analyze. So when we run 400 markers, we are analyzing really any food that's out there. Now, that includes any animal protein, any plant protein, to our knowledge. We have patients from all around the world. And we did have a patient, we have a lot from Brazil, but we had this one patient from Brazil 5 years ago who came to me with this, let's call it a different type of tree nut. And so that was the first time in a long time that I was like, all right, now we're kind of stuck because I actually don't have any data on this particular plant. So I'm just giving you the exception to the rule, if you will. So, we have to be extremely cautious on how we try to understand how this process works. We will solve for anything that we see. When you're done with the program, you're consuming all the foods that were at risk, you're consuming all the foods that were anaphylactic, and you're going to do it in a safe and functional way. I will say that once you finish the program, the chance of you developing a new food allergy, at least to date, has been zero. Again, I can only create the exceptions, which are, is there an issue with, some atypical food that we don't know about? That's the question. So, okay.
No, I totally agree because you said moderation. That's what she's 12 years old now. So we have maintained that lifestyle. You eat something in moderation, you eat it couple of days in a week, you don't repeat it again. So everything is low. That I understood when she was growing up. Never, ever, same thing every single day. So basically you don't cross the threshold. Secondly, she's on Dupixent because she has eczema. Will that interfere? Because we started Dupixent 2 years back because topical medicines stop acting basically because her rashes won't get cured. Will taking Dupixent or all those other type of treatment interfere with this treatment?
Yeah, the short answer is yes. We are very cautious with Dupixent. For those of you on the call, Dupixent is a biologic injectable agent that is used to treat asthma. It's used to treat eczema and a few other conditions. While it's highly effective, it's an effective drug for symptom relief. It is a very specific it is immunosuppressant. That's the right word. And it's modifying and suppressing the immune system. You can imagine that if you're taking an immunosuppressant and we are asking the immune system to train itself, you can see where there's going to be some conflict. However, we have a lot of experience, and we do have methods and models in place to modify Dupixent dosing accordingly. So I would just say be prepared for that because it is something we're going to ask to do. Now, I want to also mention that there are plenty of ways to manage eczema in addition to Dupixent, and sometimes you just have to find the right mix of things. But yeah, absolutely, we will manage kind of the totality of the allergic conditions.
Okay. And usually, so how long is usually the treatment plan for a kid? Like it's 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. How long on the line we are looking at?
It really depends on the total number of allergens. It also depends on which specific allergen, right? So if you look at individual foods, and again, it's all based on the types of proteins and protein sequences. By far, the let's call it the most difficult food to treat is wheat. So wheat as a whole is difficult, as the most number of sequences we have to go after. That's followed by dairy, followed by peanut, followed by some of the tree nuts, followed by egg, and so on and so forth. However, if you have a patient who's anaphylactic to 5 or 6 of those foods, you can imagine it'll be a bit longer. If they're anaphylactic to only 1 or 2 foods, and maybe it's only fish and let's say cashew, it could be a very short program. So on the short side, it can be under 1 year. On the long side, it could certainly take 4 to 5 years. It just depends.
Okay. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Next up, Ricardo. I'm going to ask you to mute. Go ahead.
Oh, hello, can you see me?
Yes.
Oh, great. Thank you. I'm still having just a little bit of difficulty wrapping my head around the difference between TIP and OIT. And I think if I could just make a statement, can you just correct it or not? Is the kind of the key difference that TIP allows the allergic person to sort of mull over the allergy at a safe level for much longer without sort of an overwhelming reaction, as opposed to OIT, which kind of slams them with the allergen? Is that how you get such a better outcome compared to OIT?
Yeah, I would say 2 things. One is OIT is basically what we call desensitization, right? So it is a desensitization model, and we've done desensitization for 100 years, right? So we do it to bee stings, we do it to pollens and all that stuff. When you're trying to desensitize somebody, and we do this to drugs as well. So if you're allergic to penicillin, we're going to desensitize you. The problem is when you're doing desensitization, you actually do not achieve remission, right? Like that's not the end goal. You're simply trying to block enough receptors for a short period of time. So for example, if you desensitize to penicillin and we treat you for 7 days of penicillin, after 48 hours, you are now as anaphylactic as you were beforehand. You've gone right back to where your prior position was. What we've achieved here is all these biosimilar protein mechanics are very critical. They actually change the way your lymphocytes, your immune cells operate. We can actually measure all those differences so that by the time they are consuming peanut or milk or anything else, they're actually downregulated so specifically that they're able to consume foods at space. So they every 7 days, 14, 21, 30 days or beyond. That type of thing is never seen in OIT. Like that's not even a goal. They don't even try to achieve that. And secondly, deep remission, this ability of kind of getting to an off switch, is simply not even discussed in the world of OIT. So OIT is a short-term desensitization model that does carry a lot of side effects and such with it. Our program is a long-term remission model where we're actually trying to get to that curative state of an off switch.
So the preconditioning with the biosimilars, you would say, is kind of the key there, and then you're able to just so carefully attune it to the patient going forward to kind of get to that sort of retraining of the body versus just desensitizing. Okay.
Correct. It's highly specific at the level of biosimilar proteins, meaning like we're talking about, amino acid sequences, RNA sequences, things at that level. And that is fully tied into our AI, right? So the AI does play a huge role in kind of forecasting and predicting the right format.
Well, great. And then my only other question, if somebody gets anaphylaxis to whatever their allergen is, does that reset kind of the timeline? Or does their body kind of get super sensitive to it again? Or is that not the case?
That's a good question. I'd say the point on this is that it depends on what amount of reaction takes place, right? Meaning, let's say it's peanut, and let's say we have not started peanut treatment, and the patient consumes a large amount of peanuts, right? So let's say like 8 to 10 peanuts by accident, and they had a severe accidental reaction. That certainly can shift things by about 30 days. So there's like a 30-day kind of modification that needs to take place. We take extreme control of the dose mechanics, right? So let's say you're on peanut dosing and you happen to have a bunch of oral symptoms with one specific dose. We're often only resetting about 5 to 7 days at that stage. So it's a very small modification, but that just needs to be, connected into our command center. We'll modify, and then we put them right back on track.
Great. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you. Great questions. Next is Dana.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Good morning, or good afternoon. We're from New Jersey. My daughter's actually on the webinar as well. She's an adult peanut allergic child. She's currently 24, will be 25 in a couple months. So we're kind of right on the cusp of the age limit for you guys. A lot of my main concerns when we looked into OIT when she started college 5 years ago or 6 years ago was the fact that she'd be spending a lot of time alone, living alone, or not having the support network during updosing and things of that nature. And that remains the concern for me today, is that she now lives on her own. Do you see older patients that are kind of in that same living situation? I mean, obviously, you would suggest that they have support in the home, particularly during updosing when you're in the tolerance portion.
Yeah, that's a great question. Roughly 15-18% of our patients are going to be over the age of 21. They are generally living independently. They are able to go through the program, very effectively. I would argue they generally do not have that kind of parental support at home or in the house at that stage. So, I think a lot of this, and it should be made clear that, look, we're an organization that's going to work with you and your specific circumstances. If your daughter is, nervous about doing the program because there's not that specific type of help, we can always modify, the vectors and models that we use, and we can go, like, in a sense, a bit slower. But again, we have a lot of confidence in what we do, and we've been doing this for a very long time. And if there's specific questions around her circumstance, I'd say call in, talk to our enrollment team. You can also talk to some of our volunteers. You'll certainly find some of them who are in their 30s now, because they kind of started in their 20s, and they can kind of walk you through their experience as well.
Yeah, I recently joined the parent Facebook page, or the previous patient Facebook page, so I'm going to look into that. Second question: we don't have a regular allergist because she's older. We just use avoidance. It's not something that she needs. I would assume that it's recommended that we have somebody follow her here on a regular basis, or that we can reach out to if needed locally. I'm not sure, other than her PCP, which again is she doesn't have a lot of issues, so we don't really.
Yeah. Generally speaking, look, we're here to manage, anything that's allergy related, and even beyond. So, we always encourage you to have a good relationship with your doctors, and let us know. We will communicate with them directly as well. But I don't think it's an absolute need to say that you have, X, Y, or Z specialist very close to, where you live. We're here to support. We're here to help. Again, our patients do have a very high rate of success, and many of them go through the program without any symptoms. So I think, if you have to look at those numbers and feel, pretty good about that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Next is Daria. Go ahead and unmute if you can.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. Oh, it looks like you just muted again. There you go.
Okay, perfect. I really appreciate you taking your time and answering all these questions for us. So my main question is, I have an 18-month-old who has a dairy and a peanut allergy. At what age is really appropriate for her to go through your whole process from start to finish, for us to kind of start this journey? I know online it says, I think you can start around 18 months, but in all honesty, like, I don't know how well she's going to do with, like your post initial dosing, stress level, like high energy session, for example. So what age do you actually recommend for young children or babies to start?
So it's a very good question. The answer is, look, we have data from 6-month-olds and older, right? So it's not like we have treated very young children. That's not a concern. the immune system, as it develops, has a number of particular milestones. Between the ages of 2.5 to 4 years of age, there's a very specific set of changes that occur in the immune system that, we often like to take advantage of, right? So kind of getting kids in during the, preferably right before that time into the time, allows for a specific type of predictability. But the honest answer is it depends on, really your child, right? I mean, are they going to consume these foods? Are they going to be, able to kind of go through this process for, a number of, potentially years? That's something that only best, right? And so if you feel like, she's a good eater, looks like she's a good eater, and if you feel like she likes to, interact and try different textures and different flavors of things, if that's the kind of kid you have, they often do really well in the program, right? Because they actually enjoy the process, they can follow along, and then as you expand their diet, they kind of know what's going on. On the other hand, if you have a child who's, kind of very selective and, doesn't necessarily want to, consume foods, et cetera, and it turns into a bit of a battle, that can be difficult. But like I tell everybody, I think you should, get diagnosed, get the right diagnosis, what you're anaphylactic to and what you're not to, right? So that's always a win. So if we can open up her diet to most foods, that's often a really good thing to do. And then, of course, if you ever need a break, you can kind of do the program for 6 months or a year and then say, all right, we're going to take a break and let them mature and develop. We are all about supporting that. And then, you come up back, a period of time later to, go ahead and finish the rest of the program. So hope that answered your program. I answered your question. Thanks. Next is Anna.
Hi there. Thanks for answering all these questions.
No problem.
I have two, and I think somewhat related to each other. So my first question is in regards to the potential diagnosis of FPIES. I know I looked through the FAQ section on your website, and it says that the treatment program is not intended to treat FPIES, and our kiddo, who's 5, does not have a diagnosis yet, although has had some with his only identified allergen that we've had thus far is egg, and has had symptoms that sound a little FPIES-like when he's had accidental exposure to egg. So I guess one of my questions is, in the setting of identifying or treating like an egg allergen, how would you be able to distinguish how you're actually treating the anaphylaxis and how many of those symptoms are not going to be addressed or things like that?
That's a great question. So FPIES is a very tough diagnosis, as you know. It's hard to make a hard diagnosis unless you're kind of in a hospital setting and you're drawing blood during certain timeframes. And that's something that's just really hard to do. It's not something we really want to do, to a very young child. I think the more specific question that I'd probably throw back at you is, we treat FPIES associated with anaphylaxis. What that usually means is the child has anaphylaxis, say, to 1 or 2 foods, and they happen to have FPIES to egg or some other, food protein. What we're able to do with that is better identify kind of what is a strategic approach towards the FPIES over time. It can be, I would say at the very least, it's more organized than the current way we treat FPIES, which is let's just give it some time and we'll see, and we'll just go ahead and try it. And then if something bad happens, we'll just stop and not try again for another few years. We can at least do better than that. And so I would argue that the exact nature and mechanisms of FPIES still elude us. It's very hard to study those questions, but we at least have a lot of data and information around what FPIES looks like in the anaphylactic group of patients. It's actually very similar to how we manage eosinophilic esophagitis, the EOE classes, right? We deal with anaphylactic patients who happen to have EOE, and we have really, really good results for those patients. I feel like we're in the similar category when it comes to FPIES. So, I don't know if I answered your question exactly, but we will use whatever data modeling we have to try to give you an idea of how we're going to approach that. Can I guarantee you it's going to be a fixed period of time, or can we forecast that? The honest answer is no. But on the anaphylactic side, obviously, we can do that very effectively.
And do you have data on those that did have like concurrent FPIES of how, and I know obviously like the natural history data is super variable on that. But do you have information on how often the FPIES was also addressed? Because I guess that's one of my concerns is addressing the anaphylaxis, and then we still have the FPIES, and we're still avoiding the allergen.
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I will say that every case we've had so far has been able to overcome the FPIES immune block that takes place. And so honestly, the hardest ones that we have are atypical things like legumes and peas and things like that. Those are the ones that seem to take a bit longer, but egg tends to be pretty predictable. And, some of your other, grains, things of that nature, they actually can be somewhat predictable. Hard data, we'd have to pull that for you, but we can, if you want to just send us a message offline, we can get you some hard numbers.
Yeah, that would be fantastic. And then I guess my second question was, I know you at the beginning of the Q&A session were talking about how adults can become anaphylactic to foods that they've been consuming. Does all that extensive blood work that you guys are doing, because obviously immune systems change and things change as people age, does that help identify some of that, or is there always that risk? Because of course, I know in kiddos that have allergens, they're likely to develop allergies as time goes on, or anaphylaxis, as you mentioned. Is that something that's identified and through that blood work, or is that something that can change and it might be this works for right now when they're this age, and then this is something that might come up a decade later?
Yeah, it's a good question. We have 20 years of data on patients now. So my earliest patients are in their 30s. They are married, they have kids, they're doing all kinds of careers. We have not had any patients develop a new anaphylactic allergen once they've gone through this program to date. And that's mainly because we are testing for every allergen that we believe is out there. There might be some exceptions, but yeah, that has not been the case. As far as like additional risk factors of developing other allergic conditions, that's a good question. Again, I think because we're tracking everything so aggressively and we are trying to modify a lot of the immune triggers, I would say the only thing that is something we haven't touched is like bee stings and venom allergy, but really every other form of allergy we are essentially addressing or modifying as they go through the program.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you so much.
Yep, thank you. Next up is Siley. Go ahead and unmute if you can, please.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi. So my daughter, as a child, she was allergic to dairy and peanut, but right now she has outgrown her dairy allergy, and we know only of her peanut allergy. And we had kind of started OIT for her, and like so far, based on the examples that you've given, you mentioned that almonds or hazelnut are the foods that are similar to peanuts, so you introduce them first. So given that she's already having those foods already, let's say if we start with your program, what will be the duration like, for her remission, like for her to reach remission?
So that's a complicated question, right? I mean, we have to look at her data, and I want to just maybe add some kind of context to that point you're bringing, which is, yes, there are biosimilar proteins, but the biosimilar proteins only work based on your child's immune response to those biosimilar proteins. So, for example, if your child has zero response to hazelnut, it serves very little value to the peanut family in that sense. So, there's not broad, there's not, I mean, if you look at all of our patients, we have very, very few patients who have, like, you can't subcategorize and group them accordingly, meaning that most patients are going to have one set of biosimilar proteins, another will have another set, and so forth. And it's important to recognize that. As far as your question specifically on, length of program, again, it's hard for me to answer that question. Obviously, I would say it sounds like it would be shorter, but we would have to kind of run the data and take a look.
The thing is that we are planning to kind of move out of US in a couple of years. So we have limited time in the US, and that was my biggest concern. Like, if we start with your program, what happens if we move out of the US? I mean, I know there are no centers outside of US, and it would be really difficult for us to, travel to US just to keep her treatment going on. So that's where I was coming from.
Yeah. Again, the first step is the same. You have to get your diagnostics run. Let's see what the data looks like. Certainly, again, we have well over 1,000 patients who fly here from other countries. You would try to finish up everything as quickly as we could, and then get her to a state of remission or close to remission, and then you can follow up, on a much larger gap of time at that stage.
And then, okay, thank you. My another question was, right now she's going through OIT, but they only like the end goal of OIT is only, um, uh, preventing them from anaphylactic reactions and accidental exposure. So given, let's say she has completed OIT already, will that be helpful with, with your program? That was like a follow-up question, and if that will help reduce the duration of the TIP program.
Again, theoretically, it should, but again, it all depends on the data. That's all I can tell you. There's no specifics I can answer, on that side of things, but I encourage you to come in, get her tested. Certainly if there's a timeline or time constraint that you're worried about, then it's a good idea to try to, kind of look at it.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
We're going to take one last question. Again, I encourage you to, join our next webinar. You can also send us messages offline as well, but we'll take the last question from Maria. Go ahead. Go ahead, Maria. Hi.
I unmuted. Yeah. Okay. Hi. I'll try to make this concise. My son has, IgE around 2000 and pretty moderate severe asthma and EOE. We did OIT. He's now 8 years old. We did OIT when he was 5, maybe 6, and that was not successful based on his EOE. He started just vomiting all foods. We, just kind of took the conservative path with food. So our family eats what he can eat. And fortunately, he's able to do a lot of, as you say, the animal proteins, right? So meats, eats those just fine. I guess I have 2 questions. One, we don't really have a solid idea of his triggers for EOE. And so I'm not sure how that will impact the path, and, in a related question, we're at this point where he tried Dupixent, did marvelously, honestly. It really did great things for his EOE and his asthma. He was more robust, and he is just really adverse to those injections. So we're working with a psychiatrist right now to approach that issue, honestly. He's he's had like stitches on his face, dental procedures, nothing fazed this guy, but Dupy injections just couldn't cope. So I guess right now we're at this point where we're trying to figure out, okay, is Dupixent our best? Symbicort, he didn't tolerate that great. He started having like an exaggerated startle response and kind of ADHD-like behaviors, which were not at all his history, and very clearly related to the Symbicort. So we're trying to wrestle with that right now and figure out what's his optimal treatment for the EOE, as well as asthma secondarily. And I'm not sure if this treatment would weigh in as to which would be preferable, Symbicort versus Dupy. And so that's I guess my biggest question, as well as how to kind of integrate with other specialists, his pulmonologist, his GI specialist, his allergist, I don't know who all.
And just to be clear, so you're saying that they were using Symbicort to treat the EOE, is that correct?
The EOE plus the asthma. So, it coats the throat. So it gives him a boost with his EOE. Certainly it's not like Dupixent. I'd never seen my child eat like that. It was a moment in time that I will savor.
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry. That's a tough, tough, complex set of issues simultaneously. But to answer your question, could we identify the EOE trigger? We'll typically narrow it down to 2 foods and often get it right to 1. That's done through all the testing that we do. I will say that.
Sorry, can I add? I left out maybe important information. His labs and his skin, he's just reactive to like everything. The one thing he doesn't react to is milk, because we did camel's milk and then goat's milk and then baked and yogurt and cheese, and he's when he was 2, and he's not allergic to milk. It's a miracle because he was. So that's the context. It just seems to be a very he's a reactive kiddo.
Yeah. And again, we deal with those kind of cases all day long. I mean, there's nothing about what you've mentioned so far that, I find overly concerning, but yeah, it's work. It's just work to try to identify, try and work with your specialist to, as Mia said earlier, we have to have a normal set of anatomy. That means when we do need the EOE under control, we cannot treat, we're not going to do TIP during, very erosive esophagitis. That's just not a good idea. So we need normalization of that. We also need a good, healthy immune system to work with. So, we'll work through those cases and we'll talk to you. We'll talk to the specialist, come up with a clear game plan. We will, in EOE cases, especially like what you're mentioning, we will ask for a follow-up endoscopy probably about 14, 16 months into treatment to make sure that everything we're doing is working and not causing any degree of upregulation of the EOE. And ultimately, again, we will typically identify, what the triggers are. Exceptions are, like I said, there are some atypical cases, like things like rice, and some things like that I always throw out there as unusual, but it does happen. So, but yeah.
Okay, so I guess I'm trying to decide right now between, Dupixent, Symbicort. I mean, we're working with a psychiatrist strictly for Dupixent. This kid does, otherwise we don't need that on board. And I was thinking of, I was going to start that Dupixent, try to get kind of greater control on the EOE and asthma before this endeavor, and maybe pushing this back to March timeline. But I don't know if it's preferable for us to get started earlier and initiate those conversations so that in parallel there's like integrated conversations with GI, etc. Or what you would suggest as far as how.
Yeah, to be honest with you, you can talk to our enrollment team. They can actually hook you up with one of our clinical consults. I think it's almost better to have that conversation now and talk to one of our clinical people, and they can kind of give you, just more specifics that will help. But the answer is, look, we work with everybody, and we have relationships with all specialists across the country and even in other countries. So we will put all the time and effort to make sure there's good coordination. I think, it sounds like he's got some complex aspects to his case that, if you're not getting the answers you're looking for, if you need kind of a second opinion, use our consult line and talk to those guys. I think it's sometimes very useful.
Okay, thank you. Do you ever see EOE or do you measure EOE, or, what was the other one that someone else brought up, another immune modulated condition? Do you ever measure those as a part of your data collection in your long term? Okay. So hopefully maybe over a period of time, you'll have some idea of the impact. Okay, sorry to go on. But
no worries. Very good question. Yeah, no, and again, let us know how else we can help. You can follow up with our enrollment team. I want to thank Mia for helping us out here. We didn't get enough questions out to Mia. We'll do that next time. But I want to thank everyone else for joining. If you have additional questions, please use our enrollment team access points. We'll have another webinar here just in a few weeks. Check us out on Facebook. Check us out on social. We have a great volunteer system here as well. Talk to those parents. They all have gone through what you've gone through. And often they're going to give you kind of the insight you're looking for to help you decide if this is the right program for you. But until then, wish you guys a very good September and good start to the school year. And we'll see you next month. Thanks.